Greetings, everyone. Well, at long last, I'm finally doing something that I've been intending to do since the very first episode of the Multimedia Chronicles, and that's talking about comic books. For this first edition, I thought we'd take a look at my graphic novel and trade paperback shelf. I've had a few requests to talk about it, so I figured, hey, a quick overview video is as good a place as any to start. I think that was the reason I've been putting off talking about the comic books for so long, because I have quite a few. Basically, the equivalent of 6 long boxes full of comics, plus all the graphic novels and such, and related oversized and magazine-sized comics, and just tons and tons and tons of stuff. I just didn't know where to begin. So, we're just going to dive right in and go with the flow. So for now, we're going to take a look at the graphic novel shelf today on Multimedia Chronicles. Welcome back. Well, this time around, as I say, we're just going to do an overview, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about each individual title on here, because there's quite a variety of stuff, and a lot of these I'd actually like to do in-depth videos about at some point, so I'll go into, deeper detail about some of them later, but for now, I just wanted to give you sort of a sense of what I've got on this shelf, so let's take a look. Okay, so first things first, we'll just take a look at the two on the top here. We've got G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, Volume 1. Now this is actually the Marvel Comics series. Marvel was actually putting out reprint editions of these a few years ago, and then they went out of print and they were highly sought after. This is the first volume. They only did 5 volumes, and they present the covers at an angle like that, which always kind of annoyed me. IDW has actually started reissuing these, which is pretty cool. Each volume contains 10 issues, starting from issue 1 and going right through the series. And I understand there's at least 6 or 7 volumes planned that IDW is going to do. So it's quite nice, very slick, glossy color reprints. Very, very nice. I like them. I'm just going to set this aside here so we can get to the stuff at the bottom there. When I get some of the other volumes of G.I. Joe, I'm going to talk about it a little bit more, because it's quite a good series. Then, of course, I have the classic Transformers, Volume 1. Now, this is the current series being reprinted, again by IDW, which is actually a DC Comics imprint. The biggest issue with these particular reprints is that some of the... Where's a good example? Yeah. Some of the comics have Marvel Comics characters in them. Originally, the Transformers were going to be part of the Marvel Universe. They eventually abandoned that idea. So this, for example, is actually Spider-Man, but you can see he's been ghosted out because it's not Marvel reprinting them. They couldn't get permission to reprint the issues with the Marvel characters, so they just have summaries of those issues, which is kind of annoying. So I'm actually looking to track down the Titan Books reprints of Transformers that came out a few years ago, because they have all the issues intact. Now, we'll start at this end and work our way back. So starting here, there we go, we have my Neil Gaiman section. This is quite a lot of stuff. I've got all 10 volumes of Sandman. I actually do have earlier editions of the first 4 books. This is actually the first Sandman trade paperback that was ever published, The Doll's House. And it's actually the second story arc. And then I guess this sold really well, so they went back and reprinted the first story arc, which is Preludes and Nocturnes, and then carried on throughout the rest of the series. So I have early printings of the first 4 books. Later editions actually have different covers. I kind of prefer these covers because you'll notice on the spines they're not numbered or anything. It's just titled by what the story arc is called, whereas the later editions are actually numbered. So I didn't get the remaining volumes until quite a bit later. I was kind of poor for a while there. And I should mention also, I do have a couple volumes autographed by Neil himself. That's volume 5, and then Volume 6 is also autographed by Neil himself. So that's pretty cool. And then, of course, I've got the 2 Death graphic novels, The High Cost of Living and Time of Your Life. Apparently this one's being developed into a movie. I don't know where that's where that stands right now, but the last I heard was they were working on a movie adaptation of that. And then we have The Dream Hunters, which is quite good. It's actually a novella, but with really gorgeous painted artwork. It's quite nice. If you can get your hands on this and you're a Sandman fan, I definitely recommend it. And then finally, we have The Last Temptation. This has been reprinted a few times. As far as I know, this is the first edition. This is one that Neil actually did in collaboration with Alice Cooper. So Alice Cooper features quite heavily in this as a character. And it's black and white, but if you notice, it's kind of in this cool sepia tone, which is quite nice. So, gotta like that. So that's my Neil Gaiman graphic novel collection. The main thing was Sandman. I understand he has done some other graphic novels since then, and I will get around to picking those up eventually. Then we have, continuing on with the DC Comics Vertigo line, we have Swamp Thing. Now, Swamp Thing, I have 7 books of Swamp Thing, and quite a few of the individual issues as well. So this is Dark Genesis, which actually reprints the first 10 issues of the original Swamp Thing series, written by Len Wein with art by Bernie Wrightson. And it's great. If you want to see how Swamp Thing started, this is where to begin, right here. It also includes Swamp Thing's first appearance from House of Mystery number 92. Then, the original Swamp Thing series ran 24 issues, and then when the movie came out in 1982, DC Comics decided to relaunch the comic. So what they did was they relaunched it as Saga of the Swamp Thing, and this is the first book of that. However, the books of Saga of the Swamp Thing don't start from issue number 1. They actually start from issue 21, which is where Alan Moore took over. Alan Moore, of course, of V for Vendetta and Watchmen fame, as well as numerous other things. So this is actually the individual issue number 20 of Saga of the Swamp Thing. This is actually Alan Moore's first issue. It wasn't included in the original reprint edition because apparently issue 20 was just kind of him wrapping up a lot of the loose ends from the previous writer, and issue 21, which is where the books begin, is where he actually started doing his own thing. So this is all 6 books representing Alan Moore's entire run on Swamp Thing. Now I should also mention that the first book has actually recently been re-released in a nice hardcover edition that that actually does include issue 20 in there. So that's pretty cool. Next up we have Vamps. Vamps, basically vampire biker chicks. How can you go wrong? There was a sequel to this as well, but I don't think it actually got a trade paperback reprint, which is why I don't have it. It's okay. I mean, it's about what you expect from a story about biker vampire chicks. Now, this isn't technically a graphic novel, but I keep it on here because I like to reread it from time to time. This is the official comic book sequel to the 60s series, The Prisoner. If you're a fan of The Prisoner like I am, this is pure gold. This is great stuff. And the phone is ringing and could not be more inconvenient. I'll be right back. Sorry about that. We'll actually move the camera back a little bit just so we don't get quite so many shadows here. So anyway, this is actually the comic book sequel to the 60s series. And as far as sequels go, it's actually quite good. Like it's very faithful to the spirit of the series and such. And if you're a fan of the 60s series, I definitely recommend picking this up. It was reprinted. I don't know if the reprint is still available, but you might be able to find the trade paperback if you poke around eBay a little bit. And with the series actually coming out on Blu-ray next month, it's the perfect time to be tracking that down. So next up, we have a collection of Star Trek graphic novels. I got a whole bunch of different ones here. Got Star Trek: The Ashes of Eden, The Best of Star Trek. Now these books actually reprint the DC Comics Star Trek series. They did a few different Star Trek series, and this is kind of a mix. Mostly original crew ones, as you'll notice, because I love the original crew. And there you go. Really nice artwork in these, I gotta say. Like, they really represent the characters and the actors who play them quite well most of the time. This one's really good, the Mirror Universe Saga. This is actually a sequel to the classic series episode Mirror Mirror, where they basically meet up with the evil crew again. And it's just absolutely epic. And I have a duplicate copy of Ashes of Eden, which I'm sending to a friend of mine. And then finally, the trade paperback of the very first ever Star Trek The Next Generation comic. The first Star Trek The Next Generation comic was a 6-issue limited series, and this one reprints that series. So very cool. I used to work at Chapters, which is a big box bookstore here in Canada, much like Indigo or Barnes & Noble. And these were on sale in the bargain book section, the Star Trek ones. And if you're familiar with bargain book sections, you know that usually there's, you can get some pretty good deals. And these were marked down to, I think, $5 a piece, something like that. It was ridiculously cheap. But because I was an employee, I also got a 30% discount. Now you might think, oh, doesn't the discount only apply to new stuff? No, apparently not. It would also apply to bargain books. So these were like $5 to begin with, minus 30%, my employee discount. So I think I paid like $2 or $3 a piece for these, and they would have gone for about 20 or 30 originally. So yeah, I snapped up every single Star Trek graphic novel they had at the time, and it was great stuff. Then we have the Batman Chronicles. This is Volume 1 and Volume 4. Why do I have Volumes 1 and Volume 4? Well, I bought Volume 1 a while ago. This is a really cool series because it actually reprints every single appearance of Batman in the original order in which they were published. So you get to see the evolution of the Batman saga. But the reason I have Volumes 1 and 4 is because I bought Volume 1 a while back, and then a Christmas rolled around and I asked for Volumes 2 and up. And, well, the one I got for Christmas was Volume 4, I guess, which was the latest one out. I think they're up to about 6 or 7 volumes now. Possibly more, I'm not sure. I haven't really been keeping track. Needless to say, I want to get caught up on that. The other cool thing about these editions is they're really cheap. They're basically done on just regular, comic book paper, nothing too fancy. It's not like glossy or anything, but really nice quality. I mean, look at the, how vibrant the color is and everything. I mean, this is great. And it's just a treat to have these classic Batman stories available in such an affordable form and in chronological order. So it reprints stuff from Detective Comics, the original Batman comics, World's Finest, basically anywhere and everywhere that Batman appeared. It's in there, and they're in the process of doing it. I think they're still only in the 40s in terms of the years they're covering, but very good stuff. And speaking of Batman, I have a couple of really good hardcover editions. But this will make a lot of you jealous. Batman Arkham Asylum. I actually haven't played the game yet, by the way, so I don't know if it's any relation to the graphic novel. But this is actually, if I remember correctly, I believe this is the first printing. I bought this when it actually originally came out, or maybe I think I got it as a gift actually. Yeah, this is the first printing. So this is the first printing hardcover edition of Batman Arkham Asylum. Really good, really dark story. Not for the faint of heart. There's some pretty disturbing subject matter in there. That's Batman for grown-ups. And speaking of more Batman for grown-ups, we also have the complete Frank Miller Batman, which is this gorgeous leather-bound edition. See if you can get some of the texture there. Yeah, look at that, eh? With silver trim on the pages. And this, well, this is no longer complete because he's done some more Batman since, but this goes all the way through, this does a lot of stuff. It basically presents the stories in story order, not the order they were published. So you have Batman Year 1, which Frank Miller wrote, and then of course you have, what is it, there's another one, what is it? Wanted, Santa Claus, Dead or Alive, which is another one that he wrote. And then finally you've got The Dark Knight Returns, which is just fantastic. And everybody knows that one. Dark Knight Returns is one of the greatest Batman stories ever written. And I'm not just saying that because everybody says it. I used to have the original first printings of all 4 issues of The Dark Knight Returns, and then sold them a few years back because I needed food. But and I figured, you know what, I just really want it to read anyway, so I sold them. And but it doesn't mean that I don't love the story. I mean, it's just a fantastic story. Then we have Spawn. My first experience with Spawn was actually the HBO animated series, which I absolutely loved. Issue 2. And then I actually tracked down issue number 10 of Spawn, which guest stars Cerebus the Aardvark, because it's the only issue that wasn't reprinted. And then we have book 3 and book 4. Oh no, actually, I guess my first experience with Spawn was actually the live-action movie. I know that probably makes a lot of you cringe. What did I think of the live-action movie? I thought the theatrical version was meh, but I actually really enjoyed the director's cut. I think the director's cut is a considerable improvement. And then we also have Kiss Psycho Circus. Kiss has been a mainstay in comic books for a very long time. The thing I love about this, though, is you know, the artwork is just fantastic in this. Let me see if I can find a cool picture for you. Yeah, like you got the Star Child there. So this sort of presents the you know, the members of Kiss as almost like celestial beings in the midst of this supernatural circus sort of horror story. It's really cool, actually. And then I've got volume 1 of The Matrix Comics. The Matrix comics are actually really good. These originally appeared on the Matrix websites, and then they reprinted them. There's a second volume out that I really want to pick up. But there's a whole variety of different art styles and stories and everything. It's almost like, you know, The Matrix meets Heavy Metal magazine. It's really quite cool, actually. And some of the stories from this were actually adapted in the Animatrix. Then we've got the very first volume of Tank Girl. My first experience with Tank Girl, of course, was the movie. And I really enjoyed the movie, so I wanted to check out the original comics. And I just love the comics. I'd really like to get the rest of the volumes of it. Well, this is a very nice edition. This is actually a Penguin Books edition, which I don't think is available anymore. But very cool. Penguin did a couple of reprint editions, but it reprints all the earliest stories of Tank Girl. Then we have Zenozoic Tales, which is the independent comic book, post-apocalyptic story that the short-lived cartoon Cadillacs and Dinosaurs was actually based on. So this is really good stuff. There was actually 2 volumes reprinting the entire original series, and unfortunately I never got volume 2, and now it's out of print and highly sought after by collectors. Then in addition to that, just a handful of original comics here. This is the Marvel's Epic Comics reprint series of Cadillacs and Dinosaurs. Reprints the first few issues actually in color, because the original comics were black and white. So there you go, you can get a little look at that. Yeah, I really like the artwork in these. It very much has that sort of old 50s you know, adventure comic kind of look to it. And now, speaking of independent comics, we got a few here. These are actually Canadian originally. A Canadian publisher called Aircel. They did this series called Samurai, which is basically the story of a modern day samurai, which was quite good. This is it was originally a black and white series. Most independent comics back in the 80s and 90s were black and white just because it was cheaper. But this one was really popular, I remember. A lot of my friends really enjoyed it. So I recently found these reprint editions fairly cheap. So it gave me the opportunity to actually check out some of these stories that my friends had been raving about for so long. And then another one also from Aircel was Elf Lord, which is a great fantasy adventure story. This one actually did phenomenally well, and they actually went to full color after the first few issues. So this reprints the entire black and white run of Elf Lord, and it was great. You know, it was a lot of fun, fantasy adventure. It's kind of light, lots of action. Not a lot of depth to it, but it's good stuff. I really enjoyed it. And now we have an absolute classic, Akira, Volume 1. There's actually 6 volumes of this. I really need to get the other 5 volumes. Back in the 80s, again, Marvel's Epic Comics line was actually reprinting Akira in 64-page full-color editions, and I still have them, actually. I have about the first half of them that they did. But a few years back, Dark Horse actually got the rights to do Akira and reprinted them in their original form, essentially, translating them in English and presenting the entire story for the first time ever. Because in Japan, this is how they were published, as basically phone book-sized volumes containing several issues worth of comics. And then, of course, this is the sort of old-style English edition where the orientation is changed from right to left to right, which is how we read things here. And in Japan, it's actually reversed. They read it right to left. Still top to bottom, like down the page, but right to left instead of left to right. So it takes a little bit of getting used to if you're reading manga in its original format. So anyway, Akira is great. If you're a fan of the movie, I highly recommend the comic because there's so much stuff that they just did not go into in the comic, or in the movie. And this is The Nam, which was an 80s comic. Came out around the time, in the mid-80s, there was all this hoopla about Vietnam War stories and stuff like that. I guess it was, some kind of anniversary of the war in Vietnam, and there was a lot of stuff coming out about Vietnam. There was, of course, Platoon and Full Metal Jacket and Hamburger Hill and tons of movies. And around the same time, there was also this comic book, The Nam, which was written by, who the heck wrote it? Doug Murray, who was actually a Vietnam vet himself. And so this was his take on it, basically doing a realistic comic set in Vietnam, sort of based loosely on his own experiences and just trying to give a sense in comic book form of what it was like. And it's really good. Apparently, over the course of the series, it kind of lost focus and became more of a typical action-adventure comic. But the first, half of it or so are pretty good. So here we have Stewart the Rat. Now we're into the actual graphic novels. These are proper graphic novels. Stewart the Rat, which is by Steve Gerber, creator of Howard the Duck. Great independent comic. You notice I have a few movie adaptations in here as well. Here's the official comic book adaptation of Dune. This is great, by the way. I love the artwork in this. It's by Bill Sienkiewicz, who's one of my favorite 80s comic book artists. He still does stuff, actually. But he was really big in the 80s and 90s. And this is just an awesome comic book adaptation of an awesome movie. Then we have an actual Star Trek graphic novel, Dead of Honor. This one's notable because it's written by Chris Claremont, who was actually really well known for being one of the best writers ever for the Uncanny X-Men. So this was his take on Star Trek, and this is really good, actually. It really has the feel of a Star Trek movie. And it takes place, I think, after the 4th one and before the 5th one. So it's somewhere in there. And it actually covers quite a wide time period. This is about a Romulan woman that Kirk knew, and sort of traces their various, the various times they bumped into each other over the years, and how it relates to a bigger story going on in the present, well, the future present. So, really good stuff. And then another one of my all-time favorite Batman stories, Batman, Son of the Demon. This one, I believe, is still in print. It's been reprinted a number of times. This is one of the earlier printings, as I recall. Oh, look at that. First printing. Okay, that's about as early as it gets. So this is the first printing of the softcover edition. This was the first time I'd ever heard about Ra's al Ghul, who most of you will probably know from Batman Begins, but and some of you might remember from Batman the Animated Series. This was the first time I'd ever heard of him as a character. I'd never seen him in the comics before, and just found him to be a really fascinating character. So this kind of is a pivotal moment in Batman's dealings with him and in particular with his daughter. So very cool. Ah, yes. Then we have The Death of GRU The Wanderer. GRU The Wanderer was a hilarious comic, basically a parody of the hack-and-slash Conan type stories, which were really popular in the 60s and 70s. Written and drawn by Sergio Aragonés of Mad Magazine fame, and it was just hilarious. So this was the one and only graphic novel they did, which was great stuff. I used to collect the comics and had quite a number of them, but unfortunately they were among many things that disappeared mysteriously in a move a while ago. This one's pretty notable for X-Men fans. God Loves, Man Kills. This was, as far as I know, the only proper X-Men graphic novel at the time, and it's really good stuff. This was my introduction to the earlier version of the 80s team. The period when I was collecting X-Men was the mid-80s, and this was from the, I guess, late 70s, early 80s. When did this come out? This came out in 82, so this was a couple years before I actually started collecting. And this particular one is actually the 5th printing. So, yeah, this was a very popular graphic novel and was often hard to find, but really good. And this is the first time I'd really seen the sort of anti-mutant hysteria aspect of the story brought into the foreground. Oh, and here's an old favorite. I reread this one so many times. Dreadstar, which is one of several chapters that tie in with the Epic Comics comic book series. I'm going to do a whole series of videos about Dreadstar at some point, because this is just fantastic. It's basically an epic space opera action adventure. If you're a fan of Blake 7, British science fiction series, you'd probably really enjoy Dreadstar, because it's got the same kind of flavor to it. It's really good stuff. Love that. Written and drawn by Jim Starlin. Then we have Mirada the She-Wolf, which I can't really show you the inside of because there's a lot of nudity in it. But again, Chris Claremont, he was like the man in the 80s, I swear, and drawn by John Bolton, who also did a comic around the same time called The Black Dragon for Epic Comics, which was one of my favorite Epic comics. Now we have a couple of interesting things that some of you may not even be aware exists. You know the movie The Black Hole? The Black Hole... I don't have it on the shelf here. It's outside. Well, did you know there was a comic book adaptation? This is so freaking rare, I can't even begin to describe. So there you go. This is the official comic book adaptation of The Black Hole, which is, you know, definitely a guilty pleasure movie and unexpectedly dark and grim for a Disney movie. This was really really cool stuff. I'm going to do a movie review of some kind about that at some point. And here's another one you may not know. There's a comic book of the original Alien. Now, this has seen better days. The glue's kind of coming apart. But this is Alien, the Illustrated Story, which is fantastic. I actually read this comic book before I even saw the movie because I was a little too young to see the movie. So for a long time, my only real experience with Alien was this comic book adaptation. But written by Archie Goodwin, who of course will be well known to Marvel fans, and illustrated by Walter Simonson, who will also be pretty well known to Marvel fans. He's done a lot of stuff. I think at the time I was collecting, he was doing the Mighty Thor, actually. So there you go. I mean, look at that. That's just fantastic artwork in this. Yeah, definitely, if you're a fan of Alien, this comic book adaptation is definitely worth tracking down, because it's just gorgeous. There's the chest burster, and then there's the alien getting Brett. Anyway, yeah, it's great. Yeah, see, some of the pages are falling out. It's not good. Not my fault. Not my fault. They used cheap glue. All right. So anyway, there you go. So there's Alien. Almost done. Ah, here we go. Return of the Jedi, the Marvel Super Special Edition. I think I actually still have the original. I had the 4-issue limited series as well. A lot of comic books a lot of comic book adaptations were actually done by multiple people. Multiple people? What am I talking about? Sorry, I'm getting distracted looking at the... Ooh, Star Wars! Actually, also adapted by Archie Goodwin, again. So, and this one has art by Al Williamson, who I think did the artwork for their Empire Strikes Back adaptation as well. Really good. Like, the renditions of the characters in here are almost bang-on perfect, like, especially for this era, where comic book adaptations rarely looked like their movie counterparts. But, yeah, very well done. What was I going to say? Yeah, comic book adaptations of movies at the time often were published in several forms. They'd have, like, individual issues as a limited series, and then they'd have the Marvel Super Special Edition. If you watched my review of Blade Runner over on the Cigarette Burns channel, I mentioned that over there. Okay, just 2 more to go here. The ATeam! Dun 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 dun. Okay, I'll spare you. So here we go. This is the actual... They did a limited series of the ATeam, and then reprinted it in this trade paperback edition. As cheesy as it is, I imagine this is probably something of a collector's item by now, too. So, there you go. No collection is complete without some ATeam comics. And then finally, last but certainly not least, Robotech, the graphic novel. To my knowledge, this has been reprinted a few times, but in slightly truncated form. The only way to get the complete story of Robotech the graphic novel is to get the actual graphic novel. Now, it did have a few printings. Yeah, this one's actually the second printing. The thing that was cool about this, though, is that it actually is a prequel to the series and gives you a lot of the backstory behind the events of the first generation of the TV show. Events which had been alluded to, but we never really saw in detail before. This was so well received by fans that elements of it were actually incorporated into the later Robotech novels, the novelizations of the series, and into other media and stuff. So it's basically become an official part of Robotech lore. Whew! So there you go, an epic look at my graphic novel shelf. As I said, that's not even all of them. I do have quite a few graphic novels that are actually still in storage. This is the majority of them, though. Like, this is the big notable ones, for the most part, as far as I recall. Anyway, whenever I find those other ones, I'll show those to you as well. As for next week's comic book segment, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I've got a few segments I'd like to do. Maybe I'll do an in-depth on some of this stuff and elaborate a little bit more. I don't know. Tune in next week and find out. Well, that's it for the graphic novel shelf. Hope you enjoyed the first comic book section. I'm probably just going to leave this one as a 30-minute one as well. This is like the week of epic-length videos. So I'll see you tomorrow for the premiere of Multimedia Chronicles Retro. Oh yeah, I know you're looking forward to it. Alright, so until then, thanks for watching, and sayonara.